All right, fun as always there with Alexis, but we're going to take a look at now the U.S. Soccer Female Player of the Year nominees. I mean, quite the roster, and I'm sure it was a very difficult decision to just narrow it down to these 5 amazingly talented women: Alyssa Nair, Naomi Girma, Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, Mallory Swanson, aka the Triple Espresso. But Sebi, let's get your vote when it comes to these 5 nominees for Player of the Year. Who you got?
Yeah, I mean, 5 real strong cases. Let's just say that. It was a good year for the U.S. women's national team, obviously winning the gold at the Olympics. So you got 5 good choices to choose from. I'm going to go Naomi Girma, okay? Now, obviously, we're looking at this award. We're thinking about the Olympic performance. Most of what we're talking about here is what she did with the national team, but it's important to note what happened with club as well. The last 2 years, Naomi Girma was Defender of the Year in the National Women's Soccer League. She wasn't that in 2024. She was still second team all league, right? Best 11. That's still a pretty good season. And I found this stat incredible, Cristina. 91.4% passing percentage for Naomi Girma. You know where that ranked in the NWSL this year? Number 1. Number 1 for a center back, okay? So she did it at the club level, but let's talk about what she did at the Olympics. She was the unquestioned, Cristina, anchor of a backline that didn't concede a single goal in the knockout rounds. When the Olympics got to the point of the tournament where it mattered the most, the U.S. shut it down, and Girma was a huge part of that. If you'll remember throughout the tournament, there was a lot of chopping and changes on that back line, right? First it was Tierna Davidson, then it was Emily Sonnet. At times it was a back 4. Sometimes it looked a little bit more like a 3 center back setup with Girma right there in the middle. But the one constant was always Naomi Girma. And the one thing that I'll say about her to wrap this up, she's a center back. They usually peak, Chris, in their late 20s, early 30s, when they've read the game for a decade. She's a 24-year-old center back who is dominant. There is a lot of room for growth in her game as she continues to have these big experiences. We've not seen the best of Naomi Girma, and yet still she is among the best players in the world at her position.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that she's only 24, because honestly, and this is solely based on what I've seen from her on the field, it looks like she's at the peak of her career, and she's 30, 31, or maybe thinking about the last few years of her career. That's how good she is, because the way that she plays, Sebi, and I'm glad you're pointing her out for this, especially because it's a center back. We can focus on the Triple Espresso. I would give Mallory Swanson maybe comeback of the year after that catastrophic injury we know that she had. But when it comes to Naomi Girma, and we talk about consistency, leadership, cool, calm, collected, she honestly should be shown to every girl who's dreaming of becoming a solid defender. How she uses her body, how she communicates, and how she just leads any defense that she is on. And to be able to keep that consistency, club and national team level, is just another thing. How big is she going to be for this Emma Hayes side?
Yeah, I mean, I think she is, when you look at it, right, the piece that you build around when you're looking at kind of the defensive side of the field. And when we think about the attack, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's an easy vote for me here with Girma, when you think about the U.S. attack, you can't really pick somebody that is kind of the constant core of it. You could say Mallory Swanson was great, but if she had a bad game, you could lean on Trinity Rodman. If Trinity Rodman wasn't on, you could lean on Sophia Smith. I don't know that there's another player defensively right now, or even in the pool that I see, that I think if I'm Emma Hayes, I can really lean on. I think there's a player in Emily Fox that is going to be a long-time sturdy presence on that back line. But she's not a central defender. She's not organizing the midfielders in front of her and everything else that's happening. Naomi Girma is such a good player that she makes the players around her better with how she plays. But with how she thinks, she's making the players around her a lot better. And I think that's what's huge about Naomi Girma. If you're a coach, it's the type of player that you absolutely dream of. So if you're asking me in 5 years, which in the international game is a long time, right? That's multiple World Cups, multiple Olympics. Who's going to be still around from this present U.S. national team in the starting 11 in 5 years? And you told me to pick one person? I'm probably picking Girma. I'm probably picking Girma. Of all the players in the national team pool right now, I think she's got the most longevity.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obvious, right? Alyssa Nair will no longer be there, but 4 of these 5 nominees truly represent the future of this U.S. women's side, which is also very good news for Emma Hayes. Speaking of future, we also have the nominees for the Young Female Player of the Year. And I mean, jumping out at me, Kennedy Fuller, Claire Hutton, they had such a fabulous season, but Jordan Bugg, Trinity Armstrong, Allie Sentner, Sebi, which leads me to the next question. Who you got out of these 5?
Who you got? All right, so this one boiled down very quickly to 2 players for me, right? It was between Claire Hutton and Allie Sentner, a couple players who had very good under-20 World Cups with the United States, where they finished 3rd earlier this year, but who also had good seasons despite their age with their club teams in the NWSL. At the end of the day, I'm going Allie Sentner, right? The 20-year-old with the Utah Royals. If we focus in on what she did with the U.S. at the Under-20 World Cup, where again they finished 3rd, she scored 3 goals. She's the only American player to win an individual award. She wins the bronze ball as kind of the 3rd best player at the Under-20 World Cup. So I give her some credit for that. And then I look at the performance during the regular season as a young player in the National Women's Soccer League. Not easy with the Utah Royals. She had 3 goals and 4 assists in 21 appearances. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but let's give some context to it. Utah was not a very good team. In fact, for a big part of this season, Chris, they were a bad team, right? They finished 11th, but they were bad. And Allie Sentner was one of the few highlights for this team, and she had those 3 goals and 4 assists despite the fact that not very much else was happening around her. You top all that off with the fact that she makes her senior debut against England this past week, coming on in the 88th minute. And I think it's a very strong case for her for the young player of the year here. And I think that cap against England is what, for me, gives her the edge over Claire Hutton. Because if I was just comparing their NWSL seasons, I would probably give it to Hutton. You know, Hutton was starting in the playoffs for a good Kansas City team in midfield. As a teenager, that's really saying something. But if I combine the Under-20 World Cup and the individual achievements there, I'll go Allie Sentner. But it's a very, very, very close call, Chris.
Yeah, and it's tough to really judge them solely based on the club level because of what you said from Utah. It's a much tougher job for Allie Sentner. Maybe if she would have been on this KC side like Claire Hutton had been, I don't know, although there's a lot of goal scorers there for the KC current side, so that would have been a different story completely. But when you think about her future in the league, Sebi, outside of Utah Royals, if you could think of a team at this moment that could really use an Allie Sentner, who comes to mind?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think there's a lot of teams that couldn't use an Allie Sentner. That's how good I think she is. I think if we're looking at the teams that are at the top of the league right now, right, we saw Orlando be able to get in behind and create problems consistently up top. We saw it with Kansas City. It was a big part of their danger. The teams that are very, very good right now, they don't have problems consistently creating attacks. So then we're dropping it down. What about a team, Chris, like Chicago, who obviously has a great superstar player in a Mallory Swanson? But how many times did we watch the Chicago Red Stars, going to be the Chicago Stars next year, and think, boy, they got to have something other than Mal, because if Swanson's not doing it, you kind of felt when you were watching Chicago like nothing else was going to happen. And I think a Chicago is one team, but I don't think there's a lot of teams that would look at an Allie Sentner and say, we don't want this player, not just for the future, but for right now. But I think a team like Chicago, which for me at the end was kind of exposed, Chris, as a one-dimensional team with Mallory Swanson, you had a dangerous piece up top. It would help the team a lot, and it would take some pressure off Swanson. And that's always good. When you're the focal point of a team's attack, you get double-teamed, you get triple-teamed, you get the entire focus of the opposition's defensive effort. And I think if Chicago's going to be good moving forward, not just kind of average, they need to add some pieces around Mallory Swanson, whether it's Allie Sentner or not.
Oh man, that dynamic duo, just you mentioning that just kind of, I don't know, got me excited to even think about it and to think about Allie Sentner's future after what we saw and what we just said about what this Utah Royals side is. I don't know why I'm thinking of a Houston Dash, although we know that they're just kind of rebuilding.
They could use anybody. They could use you and me.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I'd love to go home to play for a little bit. Why not? But yeah, this is a team that I know with Ricky Clark, they've worked really hard just to kind of create some stability and so much instability, and building around somebody like Ali Setner. Man, that would she's definitely a player that could change a club, but it's also a lot to ask from such a young player who just finished her first season. But I love to see all the future talent that's coming up for NWSL. That's definitely for sure. And this is something too that Emma Hayes could really just kind of keep her eye on. I mean, she's already clearly keeping her eye on Setner, but when it comes to, I don't know, one of these other players, when it comes to Kennedy Fuller or Claire Hutton, Sebi, we're talking about really bright futures here.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing about the National Women's Soccer League, and something that the U.S. Women's National Team really didn't have for a long time. You know, there was a time when, and we don't have to get into all the nitty-gritty of it, but the U.S. Women's National Team was really a contract game. And if you had one of those 27 contracts, you were in the team. And if you didn't, you kind of really weren't part of the team, and you didn't really have much hope of breaking in. Now, if you perform well in the National Women's Soccer League, you're going to get a look at the national team. And what the NWSL has done well in recent years is they have truly created a pathway for these young players, not just to have a place to practice, but to get real, meaningful minutes right away. We see it with Angel City and the Thompson sisters. We see it all the time. We see it with Claire Hutton in Kansas City, Kennedy Fuller, Angel City as well. You're seeing teams put not just trust, but investment in young players. That's going to pay off for the league. That's going to pay off for the players. That's going to pay off for the teams for sure. But it's definitely going to help Emma Hayes, and it's definitely going to help the U.S. Women's National Team as well.